Welcome, everyone. My name is Mikey Mhenna. Welcome to another episode of Outline, where we have our special guest, Larissa-Diana Fuhrmann, who is the co-editor of Sudan Retold. She works as a cultural manager and a curator. She holds an MA in African and Islamic Studies from the University of Cologne, with a focus on art and gender. After her great experience as an undergraduate student at Khartoum University, she decided to work in Sudan's art scene for several years and founded the urban arts initiative Yalla Khartoum with a collective of urban artists, and co-founded the feminist band Salut Ya Bannut. Welcome, Larissa. It's an honor to have you.
Hi, Mikey. Thank you so much for having me. Very excited to be here in this wonderful format.
Yeah, it's it's funny. We were talking before the chat. I first became familiar with Sudan Retold when I was getting ready to interview Khalid Al-Bey, your co-editor, and became amazed at this project and was just befuddled by how rich of a resource it was, and was super excited to try to get a hold of you and figure out how I could meet you and learn about your process as well. So I'm excited. This has been years in the making. So I'm really, really happy that we are jumping into this.
Thank you so much.
So the outline format, the reason why we call this outline is because we're trying to draw an outline of your process. And we picked this one project to try to dive into, to understand how this went from an idea to implementation to final execution. So maybe we can start with just a brief 2-minute explanation of what Sudan Retold is. If you were to explain it to your 15-year-old cousin, what is this book about?
Okay, so the book is supposed to give people an insight into Sudan and make them interested in Sudan as a country, and as a country that has a beautiful art scene that is not known a lot around the world. And it's not necessarily just about history, but it's very much about how these artists see history and the present, and also how they can imagine the future.
Amazing. So that's part of the why, but just in terms of kind of the nuts and bolts, the what. So as I understand it, there's 31 artists.
Exactly. And
yeah, what are the contents of the book?
So partly they worked solo, partly they collaborated, and shout out to Amna Al Hassan, who's one of the artists. And I saw her in the chat, and I'm super excited that one of the artists made it tonight. There's 31 artists who we had 2 workshops with and talked about Sudan, the stories that were told, the stories they've experienced, or the moments they experienced, and what's important for them to tell the world about. And so we sat down together and thought about different genres and how these stories could be told in the format of a book. So we managed to collaborate with Locale, which is an amazing organization or a collective who designed the book in order to include the 3 languages that are in the book. So it's in German, English, and Arabic. And it has a lot of visuals, but it also has texts that give you a better insight into the stories.
Cool. Okay, so the interview is split up into 3 sections: before, during, and after. So let's start with the before. So the first question is, what were you doing before you started working on Sudan Retold?
So I was working as a cultural manager at the Goethe Institute Sudan. And I had been working there for a few years and was quite active in the art scene. And that's how I met Mayada Adil. She's a fashion designer and activist and doctor who's currently based in Paris. And she was also friends with Khalid Al-Bey at the time. And he told her about the idea and that he had approached some people, but couldn't really find anyone to kind of make his vision a reality. And then she said, I think you should talk to Larissa. So she got us in touch, and Khalid and me talked for the first time. And he sent me his sketch and idea. And I was immediately super excited. So yeah, after working in the art scene for a while, I realized kind of the power of art. because I was working in the arts field, obviously also during my, like, when I was younger, I was very much influenced by like different musics, like music scenes and different forms of art. But in Sudan, it was much more like my daily life, because it was like my private life, my work life. And so that's how I worked in what you mentioned earlier, Yala Khartoum, which was an urban arts initiative, or work with Salut El Banout. And this is how, yeah.
Yeah. So I know with projects, there's often a sort of a formal start date, but in your mind, what was the exact moment that you thought, okay, this project is starting? Like, this is all of a sudden something, there's not just a fun conversation. This is the starting point of taking this seriously and really working on it.
It's a good question. To be honest, we talked for the first time, Khaled and me, and not even a month later, we did the first workshop. Because immediately I thought, oh my God, this idea is visionary. This idea is really, really good. And it has to be done. And like, as much as I can do for making it a reality, I will do. So Khaled came over to Sudan from Qatar, where he was living at the time. And we started right away. So I immediately felt the spark.
What do you think was actually so visionary about it?
I think I saw so many like coffee table books about Sudan, but always written by foreigners about Sudan. And Sudan is very often described by people who are researchers or writers or people who visit Sudan for a while or something. But to have a coffee table book that kind of is based on the stories told by Sudanese artists and a group of very inspired people and very creative people, I thought that was something very unique. And also to get to know a country through its artists and through very personal stories of these artists, like family stories, I thought that was brilliant. And also Khaled didn't care if someone is an artist, you know, like we had a dentist, we had a chef in the book who were working with us, because everyone has a story to tell, and it just depends on how we collaborate and how we come together and how we respect each other in like the stories we tell.
Yeah, I love that, because it's like de-weaponizing this term artist, which I think is in so many ways, in so many contexts, like completely misused and weaponized in a way that excludes people. So I'm really, really quite happy that that was the approach. Okay, so I want to ask you, one of my favorite questions that we ask in these outline episodes is, what was the first version of the name for the project? And why did you land on Sudan Retold?
So actually, it wasn't that much different. It was Sudan Untold, Retold, because there's also a lot of stories that people in the country, but especially outside the country, have never heard of. And that's why Untold was in the first title. But just to make it shorter and like more on point, we dropped the Untold and just made it Sudan Retold.
Yeah. What was the prompt that went to the artists or went to the contributors? Was there a specific prompt that was, hey, everybody, we're retelling Sudan? What was the prompt?
There was a call for applications where we asked people to kind of try and understand the vision that Khaled brought into the project of retelling history through art, and told people to kind of tell us a bit about themselves and about what they could imagine telling others in this book. And then in the first workshop, Khaled kind of tried to like read the room, which he's really good in, and like and try and kind of gather the different talents that were in the room, and then describe how he could imagine the book to look at, like at the end. Obviously it changed several times because we're many people who were involved, and we didn't know how the book would look like at the beginning because it was quite experimental, to be honest. But that's how it worked.
So this question is, when and where did you have the light bulb moment? But I think I want to change this slightly and ask you what the workshop was like. This first workshop, what was the actual sort of like programming of the
So,
workshop?
yeah, so we did it at the Goethe Institute Sudan, obviously, because they were the ones who I was working for, and they were also the main supporters in making this a reality. And so we were inside the library, actually, and we had a projector, and Khaled started to talk about his vision, and then everyone introduced themselves, and some people I already knew, some people were completely new to me. So it was quite exciting to have this room of people together. Also, two historians joined us to have this perspective as well. And then everyone just started brainstorming. And sometimes when someone didn't really know, like, yeah, I come from this area of Sudan, but I don't really know what should I tell about this area or this place. And then Khalid would be like, talk with your grandmother, see what your family has to tell you, you know? And that's how like one chapter was made. It was a conversation between one of the participants, and she was talking to her grandmother, and then another artist, the one who's actually here, Amna, she joined her and then painted this conversation between her and the grandmother, talking about like history, like how did she experience growing up. And I thought that was beautiful, like how, you know, like getting together there and thinking about this idea of how do you want to tell the story of your homeland, how do you want to tell the story of yourself, you know, like how can you do this, like what are the means? And as you said, it's not necessarily this elite art scene and you have to have I don't know what kind of resources and libraries. No, it's like talking to the Sital Shai in the street, it's talking to the grandmother, it's like talking to a child, you know, and that was nice.
So nice. Okay, so next question is, who are, I won't make you say five, but who are some of the like unlisted co-founders who aren't part of the project, but they've influenced your work and they've influenced your thinking so much so that you can actually kind of still see their DNA in the project? Maybe it's people you've never even met, but are there anyone that, any people that come to mind?
I think that's a really good question. And I think for the 4 or 5 years I was working in Khartoum before we started the project, a lot of people I had met, you know, like if it was like we did skateboarding workshops and some of the kids and like the way they were talking to me about, you know, the world and how they experience it and what they want to do in life and so on. And it could also be an older artist who had a lot of experience already, like Sharhabil Ahmed and like these, you know, icons.
Icons
Of
absolutely.
art, of the art scene, like Kamal Khela and like these people who you meet and you feel like this gravity of the moment. So I think a lot of people I met just during that time, that was very influential for me, of like how to think about how a place is represented, and also me as a foreigner coming into this project and what is my role, how can I be valuable for this vision and idea.
Yeah. Did you have, before we get into the during part, given how thoughtful you are and given how part of the genesis of this book was based off the fact that coffee table books about Sudan had been written by all these foreigners, how did you sort of manage what I'm sure the trepidation I'm sure you had about, oh, you know, what position do I have on this team? How do I manage the delicacy of my position?
Yeah, I think you know, I had friendships with a lot of people I could talk to about my work, especially in Khartoum, and artists who were in the project who I knew for a while. And to be honest, Khaled is a wonderful person to work with because he's really honest and you can talk very like good with him, like straightforward, and like he talks to you very straightforward. And I always felt I really appreciated any kind of input I got and any kind of like criticism I got, and I tried to kind of like we tried to kind of grow together into this project, I think. And I think sometimes it was valuable also to have a bit of an outside perspective, because beside like I had been there for a long time at this point. But our goal was also to reach an audience who had maybe heard of Sudan before, or who might not even be able to point out Sudan on a map. So to have this outsider perspective of, we need to explain this a bit more, or, you know, like we need to put some kind of footnotes, was, I think, also helpful just for the audience. Cool.
Okay, I want to move on to the during. But maybe right before we do, were there any sort of points of friction that slowed down from idea to actually starting to work on it? And how did you maneuver past those points of friction?
I think everyone who tried to publish a book before knows how hard it is to find a good publisher who understands your vision and who accepts certain things that you don't want to change about your idea. So finding a publisher first took a bit of a while. And then we found this wonderful Berlin-based publisher, very small, very nice. I've done a lot of great work in the past 20, 30 years, Hirnkost. And I think also, while Sudan was like pre-revolution, there was already a lot of things happening, like politically and socially. And I think it was not always easy for everyone to focus on such a big project, while the daily life was sometimes quite exhausting. So I think I really appreciated how everyone kind of fought through it and made it a reality. And we took a long time because it was so experimental, and because it was 3 languages, and because it was so many different chapters that we had to find a red line through. So yeah, it was a bit, there was some things that were challenging, but to be honest, it was a really good experience.
It's so funny, Larissa, I see you spacing out briefly, thinking back to all the trauma of, you're like briefly zoning out, like, oh my God, that was awful.
Yeah, it wasn't awful, but it was challenging for sure.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to the during. So once it gets off the ground, you do the first workshop. Besides the Goethe Institute, are there other sort of early believers who are on the team or not on the team that really shaped the project?
I think the most important ones are the ones you see on the photo, and a few people who contributed, but not being in Khartoum, but being in the diaspora, or for other reasons not having been there that day. But I think that everyone who came together in these 2 workshops, how we believed in it and how we thought we can make this happen. This is our project. We're doing this. Like, that was the most important part. And then for sure the Goethe Institute, and then also some institutions who kind of agreed to support us for the launch, for instance, in Berlin, Savvy Contemporary, and in Khartoum, the Beit al-Turaf, and obviously also the families of the artists who contributed so much. Maybe we'll get into that.
Yeah, how many of them knew each other beforehand? Was this a community that are a pre-existing community that you just were tapping into, or did the project serve as connective tissue?
I think not everyone knew each other, no, but a lot of people had heard from, like, about each other, or had met before, or had seen each other's work before, but it was not like a group that already existed, but it was like different groups that kind of got together there, or individuals that got together there. Yeah.
So from the first workshop until publishing, if you were to sort of put it into phases, and let's say I was starting a book project, a really similar book project, and I was asking you for advice, like, okay, so we had our first workshop, like, what do I need to expect? What are the sort of phases after that?
Yeah, first I would say I can tell you how like how we did it and what we experienced, but I'm sure it will be different for you.
Yeah.
But first, the call for proposals, finding the artist, finding a designer, then kind of gathering all the info we had and all the material we had and making a proposal to find a publisher, then go through the process with a publisher, then going through the different design steps to figure out how to put it together. There was a lot of translation work involved, obviously, proofreading, finding the right paper, finding the right, you know, like, do we want hardcover, do we want softcover, how does a cover of a book look like that comprises 31 artists, you know?
Yeah.
And like all these questions, and then how to get the money maybe for the publishing process itself, how to price a book like this, where to distribute it, how can people purchase it, and then find launch venues and get people on board.
Just like that. So I want to ask about the call for proposals. How many submissions were there? So you ended at 31. How many submissions were there?
I think around 100, 120, somewhere between that line.
Okay, wow. That's a lot.
Yeah, it was a lot, yeah. We were ourselves surprised because we thought, do people understand the idea? Like, can we convey properly what we want to do? And it worked out well. Yeah.
So during that process, I'm sure there were failures, of course, and missteps and mistakes and screw ups, but those are usually the most instructive points and some of the most useful turning points. Is there one that sort of jumps out at you during that crazy list of things that you just described? Was there one where you're like, oh, this was we screwed that part up, but thankfully we fixed it later, but I learned the most during that screw up?
That's a good question. I'm not sure how to answer this. I think I would have loved to have someone by our side who could help us in the steps and to fast forward it, because, you know, it took a long time, and like everyone waited for this book like 3 years from the first workshop, and that's a long time to wait for a project, you know. And a lot had happened, like the revolution was happening in Sudan, still happening, like to everyone who's here right now, like keep your eyes on Sudan, please, and support the people who are there. And I think that was my main issue and my main failure, that it lasted so long. Yeah.
This might be directly related to that, but were there critiques of the project that influenced the way you actually did the work, internal or external critiques that influenced the process?
For sure. I think we try to do it in a collaborative way so that we give each other critique, you know, like that we criticize each other. So the artist would kind of look above the shoulder of the other artist and kind of say, oh, maybe you can do this or that. And I think that was very valuable because, you know, like having everyone work together this way and try and understand what everyone was doing, I think was really helpful. But then also the publisher, who was based in Germany, who had not worked with anyone from Sudan before, just from their side to sometimes say like, I do not understand any of like what is happening in this chapter. Can you make this more understandable for someone who doesn't know? And obviously this is not a dictionary and this is not a history book. And, you know, like this is not what we want to convey. That was not our goal, but we still wanted to make it understandable. So yeah, this criticism from the publisher was also helpful. And besides that, we also made a website. So for people who cannot purchase the book for any reason, we have a website where you have a short insight into every chapter, so at least everyone can understand.
Which is, if I can make a plug for the website is gorgeous, and it is how I became super excited about Sudan Retold. So
thank you so much. That was the Goethe Institute headquarter. Actually, they built it, and also their criticism of like, how does this work? How does that work? Was really helpful as well.
Yeah. What was the process of actually editing these pieces, editing 31 completely different pieces that is trying to, as per the title of the book, trying to retell a really diverse, rich, complex history? How did you approach the responsibility of editing it?
So it was Khalid and me editing it, but who also took a big part in this is Ala Sherfi from Lokale, from the collective that did the design, because she also managed to kind of figure out which chapter comes after which chapter. How does it make sense? Because, you know, if you read the book in Arabic, obviously you read from one side to the other. In English and German, you read from the other side. And so it had to make sense both ways, right? And I think she did a marvelous job in putting them together, because it didn't make sense to do it from like which time period the chapter is from, or alphabetically or something like that, but to find also an aesthetic way of like how they can be put together. And it was also really great to see all the drawings and all the sketches and all the different papers we had at the beginning, to see them for the first time comprised in something that looked like a book for the first time, like one PDF, and then to juggle around with it and figure out like, where do we put what and who feels represented where in the book. Yeah.
So there's this question of what pro tips do you have, but I want to change the question a little bit and ask you, what is like your favorite memory, a moment that sort of jumps out when you think about the actual work, the process of editing, collecting, that entire long process that you described? Is there a moment that just makes you smile every time you think of it? And then in addition to that, is there a moment where you really considered quitting and ending the project?
Yeah, I never considered quitting. I was tired at some points because I thought, why is this taking so long? How can we not make this faster? But to be honest, like my favorite moment is pretty much that evening where this photo comes from, because it was the launch in Khartoum at Beit al-Turaf. And it was so, so nice to kind of bring most of the artists together again. Not everyone was there, unfortunately, but most of them. And then to see their parents and to see their families and to see so many other people who had been around us and with us for so many years. And to meet some of the parents and hear their perspective on like, I went to this and that archive for my daughter, and I went through the old photos of this and that, and kind of to have this moment and understand what it meant, not just for us, the core group, but what it meant for so many people who were in the room with us, because like the house was so full, like we couldn't fit everyone into the house. Like it was literally so many people who came to support, and to see how many people believed in this and wanted to push this forward was like marvelous, was amazing.
So let me ask you, as we get into the after section, how many years had you been living in Sudan by the time you finished working on it?
So I came for the first time 2009, 2010, when I studied at Khartoum University. Mm-hmm. And then I came again from 2013 to 2018. Yeah, and we finished the book in 2019.
So it's a 10-year span. Okay, so my first question of the after thing is, you, of course, learned a lot about publishing during the process. Akid, you learned an enormous amount about the idea of editing a book. But what did you learn about Sudan that sort of surprised you by the time you were done? How did your own understanding of this place change through the process of editing and publishing the book?
Yeah, I mean, I learned every day like so much, and I continue learning obviously all the time about like the rich history of Sudan and also the present and what's happening now economically, politically, socially, and all these things. And but through the book, it was not just learning facts or learning while doing something, but these very personal insights into the artist's life as well. Like there was one chapter from Inas, and Inas worked together with a photographer, and she designed jewelry pieces and like other accessorizes according to different regions in Sudan. And then she worked with her grandmothers to actually pose for the photos wearing these accessorizes. And to hear about like how so many parts of Sudan, so many traditions, so many languages are represented within one family, I think that was really fascinating to learn about. And then Inas actually sat together with her grandmother when she had the book and took a video of it and posted it on Instagram. And I nearly start crying when I say this, but she sits with her and she shows her the book for the first time and says like, see Haboba, like this is you, like this is what we made together. Amazing. And like these personal stories of understanding like oral history and like how families work together and how it's so important to tell your own stories and like not have it told by some like Western researchers or like some, you know, whatever art historians from abroad, not bashing anyone, like, but I'm just saying that like the importance of telling your own story, I think, yeah, that was really valuable for me to see and experience.
Amazing. So knowing what you know now, what are a few things that you wish you had done from the very beginning to before the project really started, like at the workshop? What are some of the things that you kind of wish you did in a different order in order to get this thing done more successfully?
I think, to be honest, that would just be like formal things, like hand out a list and say, send me your biography with 160 words, 12 times New Romans. Like, this is the Dropbox folder, save it here.
Oh my God.
Just like things like this, because if you have so many people in so many countries, like doing something to like bring it all together and like put it in the same form, like that was quite a challenge. So it was just small things like that that just take a lot of time to you know, do if you didn't do it at the beginning.
Yeah, such good advice. The devil's in the details. How do you think about success when you think about the project? I mean, there is some, to some extent, it's just the fact that it exists, right? Completion is the metric, that it exists, that you can hold it. But from your perspective, this was a visionary project, and the vision wasn't just to get it done. The vision was to accomplish something. How do you actually think about success? I
think this photo actually says it all, because this is Sarah Amin, and the picture she's holding is her chapter about Candace, like a character of a Kandake and what she can do. And this moment of her having the book in her hand and like showing it to family and friends at the launch evening, like seeing everyone being like, we did this, we're super proud. That was everything. That was everything we needed. Like just the moment holding it in our hands and being like, yeah, we did this together. Like now everyone can see this. That was good. Because I mean, like at the end, our goal is, now we want people maybe to be surprised and be like, oh, this is, you know, Sudan's history. Oh, this is so interesting. But at one point, we don't want people to be surprised anymore. We want people to expect like this brilliance. We want people to see that this is, you know, like normal, and all your preconceived ideas might not make sense, you know, like this is the goal. But for now, it's like, showing people things that they have not known before, and make them aware of what Sudan can be and is.
Yeah. I wanted to ask this question. I don't know if it applies, but are there any ways in which you and Khalid sort of fundamentally misunderstood the project and the impact later? Like maybe in the beginning you thought, oh, you know, this is going to be for a German audience or audiences outside Sudan. Those are the core constituents. Those are the people who this book is really for. And the artists are really going to be just a medium to try to raise interest. And then later on you realize, wait, actually this book is for the artists themselves. That's the beauty and the power of the project. Maybe I answered your question for you.
I love your answer. Perfect. Yeah, no, definitely. And also Khalid and me both, we received messages from people on Instagram where people tagged us, and when they looked at the book for the first time, when they bought it, and just to see the reactions and what it meant to also a lot of, you know, younger people in the diaspora, and like how it connected them to a country that maybe sometimes felt quite distant to them. Like this is what they would describe. So I'm just like telling you what they describe. And I think that was really powerful to hear how it can shape someone's identity as well, you know.
Cool. Okay. Before we move on to the quick Q&A, so what's next? There is some exciting news of what's coming next. So tell the people what is coming next for Sudan Retold.
Yeah, we're working on Sudan Retold Volume 2. And
the remix, baby.
Huh?
I said it's the remix, baby.
Yes. Yeah. And we met for the first time online, unfortunately, because we had planned a workshop in November in Sudan. And a few days before our workshop happened, or was supposed to happen, the coup d'etat happened. So we were not able to get together because obviously everyone who's here knows how the situation is right now in Sudan. And this is why everyone has to, you know, kind of keep their eyes on Sudan and try and support the people who are there right now fighting for literally their existence. So that's why we got together online, and we are connecting every day online and chatting about, you know, the ideas of the participants. We had another call for applications just like last time, and selected a group of wonderful people who partly we knew before, partly are completely like new to us. So that's really beautiful. And there's a lot of interesting topics. We don't know how they will work together, but it's just like, you know, in the first book, it's a journey and we'll figure it out. But there's already a lot of amazing topics coming up that I really want to see how they develop. I also just saw in the chat that Yusuf El Amin is here, who's also one of the artists. So yeah, thank you so much to all the artists who are still supporting this so many years into the project.
So what are some of the challenges that you see ahead for Volume 2 that you're trying to prepare for from now?
Say it again, please.
What are some of the main challenges that you're trying to figure out how to maneuver or unpack?
So I think the main challenge is now doing all of this, but completely remotely with people like in different places and never meeting face to face, because it makes it much harder to collaborate. Also to have like that the artists cannot get together and kind of look at each other's work, influence each other, support each other, maybe collaborate. This will be much harder to manage, to make this feeling of a community that was so important for us in the first book. Yeah. And I hope that is something that people feel when they look at the first book, something that we created. And I hope we can do this again. And then also we're still looking for a publisher. So if anyone is interested in supporting us or has any leads, please, send us a message. And
cool.
We'll see.
Well, I'm very, very excited for it. Okay, let's do the quick Q&A, and then there are some questions from the chat. Okay, the first question is, what are you reading or watching right now? These days, yeah.
So a bunch of books. Actually, I put two next to me to answer this question. There is this poetry collection. It's called Soon, the Future of Memory. It's from Anya Saleh, a German-Egyptian poetess who's based in Berlin. And I highly recommend her work. Beautiful poetry about identity. And then there is Medina Tinur Whiteman, who wrote the book The Invisible Muslim, which I think is a very interesting take on Muslim identities and visibility. And because it fits so much to like the last 2 years where we're just online digitally, is Shoshana Zuboff, The Age of Surveillance Capitalism.
Oh yeah, of course.
Also a topic we should all be into.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Who would you love to shadow for a day, past or present?
So many people. That's very hard to choose.
Yeah.
I guess historic figures. Sure. I could imagine Miriam Makeba, for instance. And I think to understand what this woman managed in her life, and like as an artist, as a woman, as a Black woman in that time being exiled, yeah, I think shadowing someone like this for a day to understand the gravity of like what you can do as one person, like how you can change the world as one person, that would be great.
Cool. What do people most misunderstand about your work?
I guess you would have to ask people that, like, make assumptions of my work, everyone here in the audience, and put it in the chat, and then I'll try and debunk it.
Yeah, and along with that, Times New Roman 12 bio and 160 characters, please. Okay, outside of your profession, whose work are you inspired by?
Oh, many people. To be honest, I'm inspired. It could be by like someone who, you know, I'm going somewhere to eat and it's the chef because of the way he or she makes the food, you know, or it could be the person in the bookshop I go to buy books and because of what he or she is telling me. And obviously family can be also very inspiring if it's the one that you're born into or the one you choose, you know, and like everyone in the book, like super inspired by Khaled and like all the artists in the book. Yeah.
Okay, great. So we have a bunch of questions. The first couple come from Samar, who I've asked on mute. But I will, oh, there you are. Hey, Samar.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, Lar.
Hi. So nice to have you here.
It's such a great talk. Thank you very much for it.
If you want to, Samar, if you want to turn on your video, you can do it.
Unfortunately, my video doesn't work.
No worries. Okay, go ahead.
Well, I don't know actually, Mikey, because I put a couple of questions. Do I ask one? Do I ask a couple?
Go for, I think we have time for a couple.
Okay. I was just wondering, I know it's a terrible question, Lar, but what's your favorite piece? And I know you have artists watching, but like you can name a few of your favorite pieces.
Yeah, obviously I love all of them. But I mean, the ones who touched me a lot are the ones, as I said, where I met the families. So in A's chapter about, you know, like women in Sudan and like seeing her grandmother and how she reacted to it, definitely one of my favorite chapters. The one that I mentioned with the Haboba that Amna al-Hassan painted, beautiful chapter. I think the one about Gordon and how Gordon was killed and a different understanding of, you know, like how colonialism can be defeated, beautiful. Yusuf El-Amin, yeah, obviously also beautiful work. He actually has 2 chapters in the book. Really love his very, you know, like comedic way of presenting things. While El-Senosi did beautiful photo manipulations that were great. I love the recipe of Omar, who from Sudanese Kitchen, who tried to make us understand how Marisa is cooked and like what that means within society, and yeah, many great chapters.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. And Yusuf, yeah, I think she said you just because you were crying in the chat. Something that you edited out, you ended up, did you end up editing out any of the pieces, or were all the pieces included in Retold?
Painful question. Yeah, we actually had to edit out 3 chapters because it was before the revolution, and because we didn't want to put anyone in danger, and because there's just some stories, it wasn't the time, it wasn't the place to tell them. Hopefully in the future, but like that book at that time was not the place to tell these stories, and it's really unfortunate, but we had to make decisions for everyone.
Will they be included in Retold too?
We'll see.
Okay. My final question, what's the biggest lesson that you gained from the first Retold that you will take with you to the second Retold? You kind of said a few things about that, but like, what's something that, even if it's technical, or even if it's about the workshops, that you would like to kind of fix for the second Retold?
Yeah, mainly, as I said, the time, but maybe it also had to take that much time because it was the first time we did it. But I think making, like, advertising more, finding more people, finding a bigger audience. Also, the pandemic came in our way, but we wanted to travel to more countries, maybe to the US, maybe to the UK, and present the book there. And I think that would have been really vital to how the book can be spread. And that's definitely a lesson we learned. We have to advertise for it because we're the ones who can tell, like, who can make people the most excited about this book.
All right. Thank you so much. And this is such a great talk. Thank you, Mikey.
Thanks, Samad.
Thanks, Samad.
So, Larissa, I have one final question for you before we wrap up. And that question is, how do you hope that this project sort of evolves over the next kind of 10 years? Do you imagine that this is part of a broader series? Do you hope that there are other projects that other people make that kind of eclipse this? What do you hope that how do you hope that these seeds will grow?
I would love to see how other artists and creatives and people approach us from Yemen, from Lebanon, from Palestine, from Libya, from Syria, from Iraq, from Afghanistan, from like many places, and they say, hey, we want to do the same. Like, we have stories to tell. There have been a lot of stories told about us, but now, like, our artists, our creatives, like, we want to tell stories. Like, so there would be a series of like 20 books from like different countries of people doing the same. I think that would be beautiful. If anyone feels inspired, please like take the idea and run with it.
I love it. Well, Larissa, thank you so much for making the time for this. This was really a treat. As I've said many times, this is an inspiring project, and I'm really, really happy that we were able to unpack it together.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. Thanks for the audience, for your patience, and for listening, and for being so supportive. So
Larissa can be found online on all those different social media platforms, Larissa Noor. And please, if you have a moment, really, I encourage you to go to the website and check out the incredible platform that they've built. And tomorrow we have one more talk for the week, and it's going to be a really good one. Hiba from the Arab Image Foundation is going to be on the program. It should be a lot of fun. This will go up on our podcast feed tomorrow, as well as on YouTube. If you don't subscribe to our YouTube account, do us a favor, subscribe. It takes just a second and really helps us in a really big way. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much. Big up to Fikra and like everything you're doing.
Thanks so much.